Welcome, Chosen X. You cross a threshold that has no elaborate fanfare but carries a hush like winter light through thin glass. Air here is measured and patient, it keeps a ledger of small acts and quiet mornings. Someone once traced your route in ink believing they tracked a fault. They expected a stumble. They found instead a posture that refused to collapse. You have learned how to repair without returning poison to the room. That refusal became a kind of gravity that altered the angles of conversation and the paths people thought they could take. A presence older than rumor noticed the shape of your refusal and chose to intervene with a law that does not bend to cunning. What aimed to ensnare became a corridor where truer things could be seen. You arrived at this bend without spectacle, your life stitched itself together through countless modest, honest motions. No sudden cleverness saved you. Rather, faithful acts performed when no eyes watched accumulated into a capacity that could not be circumscribed by a plot or ledger. Breathe and attend to what loosens when light touches the crust of a long-held worry. A small answer rises in your chest as a settled yes. Tasks that once seemed far now sit closer. The line between wanting and making things. This is not a windfall but the steady aligning of inward will and outward opportunity. Groundwork in secret now receives what you place there with less friction. The chamber that once expected collapse now tilts toward clearer sight. Observers who set snares find, to their surprise, a mirror. Some avert their eyes and feel a new unease. Others rearrange their assumptions in silence. You do not revel in their discomfort. You continue to choose with patience, precise and unhurried, bearing a resolve that refuses noise. Restraint here is not surrender. It is a deeper authority that needs no shout to be recognized. Imagine a seed sleeping under cold soil, doing nothing visible until warmth arrives and a gentle pressure splits the shell. The tiny push is invisible, and yet the field is altered. Much of your movement has been like that, unseen, patient, irreversible. One task at a time you move from waiting into the building. You stop seeking signs to excuse action and begin to make signs by the work you do. Influence finds you not to adorn but to entrust. New responsibility will test humility. Bright stages will tempt with applause and loud affirmation. You will answer by choosing steady rooms over theater. In quiet places the authority you carry will be visible because it tends rather than parades. Practice serving where the work needs hands rather than praise. Tonight, when ordinary sounds frame the edges of your day, set down what weighs you unnecessarily and let your hands become tidy. Offer thanks for the small fidelities you kept. Ask for motives that remain clean and for clarity that guides without spectacle. Expect direction to arrive as a path rather than a flash. It will require your participation. You are not a spectator of this movement. You are invited into the labor that keeps it going. Keep steady. The next step lies near though you may not fully see it. Walk with a heart that balances patience and action, measuring the former as carefully as you measure the latter. This season will not promise ease. It promises that the work you do now will outlast applause. When the next scene appears, the light will change shape and your role will be clearer. For now, practice the small, ordinary acts that compound into lasting architecture. They are the quiet scaffolding of a life that will hold when scrutiny returns. And keep your hands open. Let gratitude reshape attention so that when offers arrive you can test them by whether they ask you to trade what matters most. Budget hope like you budget hours. Keep a small line where impatience can be shown the way out. What you tend now serves many beyond your own days. Tend those near you and refuse to trade steadfastness for a quick applause. Some observers return with softer faces. Others do not. Learn the economy of mercy and the contour of wise fences. Walk at night down a narrow lane lit without demand. Notice small kindnesses that sound like small bells. Practice presence briefly. These exercises compose a new season. Your influence will arrive quietly, as unremarked days that summon to integrity. When someone names you steady, allow gratitude to pass through rather than settle into a throne. Let it become fuel for service. When courage is asked of restraint, answer with the next task. The voice that guided you in secret will guide you in public. Move forward with a steady heart and hands ready to serve. Amen. You return to the place where questions gathered and find it rearranged by what you refuse to pretend. People who once kept lists of your hours come with papers and expect to fit your life into diagrams they can sell as proof of flaw. They set their queries like straight lines, confident that a single misstep will reveal a pattern to close around you. Instead, they encounter a posture that answers with calm rather than arguments, and that calm bends the conversation into something else. You do not perform silence for effect. You hold it as a discipline so that truth may find its proper shape without being pulled into spectacle. Their instruments of judgment register data but not the quiet courage that lives behind each modest action. That courage is not loud. It accumulates like winter sap under bark and appears only when warmth returns to the wood. You stand measured, offering only what the moment fairly asks of you, and by doing so you refuse to let a hurried verdict become the day's law. Those who expected drama discover margins where their own assumptions sit exposed. Some leave softened, carrying questions that begin with regret. Others leave unchanged and carry the same old certainties like a coat that will not be undone. An older watcher, whose hands recall many files and whose eyes have read enough of life to grow cautious, pauses in the doorway. He remembers counsel kept in a small book and a lesson learned the hard way. He goes outside to the river and lets the cold air cut the fog from his thoughts. There he finds a line that settles his stomach and offers new direction. He comes back with slow steps and a note that will later be folded into the ledger he keeps. You do not take pleasure in the discomfort of those who misjudged you. You keep working at what repairs need tending, cataloging truth with a steadier hand than their haste would prefer. When the records are sorted, the traces of the plot reveal the fingerprints of those who set the plan. The circle they thought would trap you becomes a mirror of their own making. This does not become a spectacle of triumph for you because triumph would alter the posture that kept you safe. You choose instead to write an account that tells honest facts without adding venom. You speak plainly when the answer is due and reserve silence for the places that belong to reflection. Time does the work that rhetoric would only disturb. You do not rush to collect a tally of rightness. You allow consequence to be handled by the order that governs more than rumor. Later, messages are reviewed and the lines between those who plotted and those who were merely involved begin to appear. Where they had hoped for a simple narrative, a complexity reveals itself. Contracts, emails, notes, and hurried calls trace a web that returns to hands they did not expect. It is less an unmasking than a slow recognition. You remain the same work done in daylight in the small rooms where you practiced giving. The voice that escorted you when no one watched continues at your side. You notice that offers arrive in different tones. Some are quick with bright language, others speak with steady clarity. You choose the latter because steadiness keeps the work honest. Some of the watchers carry relief, some carry a new shame that pricks their sleep. One of them goes to a small chapel and sits while light finds the page of a worn book. He finds a promise that asks him to hand a direction to a steadier care. You carry your tools home and set them on the table. You name the duties you will face tomorrow and ask for hands that remain clean. You sleep amidst ordinary noise, and a lamp glows near the floor like a cautious friend. That hush is not emptied. It is a presence that continues to file away doubts and direct small mercies. You wake with a different breath. Your pace has softened in ways you noticed only after a few days. Where urgency once pushed you to answer every call, you now let some things wait while you do the work that matters. You measure your patience as deliberately as you measure your labor. This season does not make all burdens vanished. It simply gives you instruments that work for what remains. You find an overdue payment settled and the tone of a returned ally shifted toward clarity. You count such changes not as windfalls but as signs that the order you practiced is meeting the world in ways it can sustain. You budget. Hope the way you budget hours and find gratitude training your attention. When you speak you do so with fewer words and more care. When you act you follow the narrow demand of the task. Slow measures build the house that will keep weather out. You learn to rest without guilt and to labor without frenzy. Small courtesies mend old edges. A shared meal that knows no audience. A note that asks nothing in return. A prompt answer to a call that has waited. These brick by brick create a shelter that protects the work you have been given. 80 times a voice urges you to stop. You wake to a morning that feels like a promise kept, not because events shout success but because small certainties line up in tidy order. You have moved through a season where unsettled days tried to name you by their worst hour, and you learn the discipline of answering only what is fair. Now your hands are steady in ways you scarcely noticed while strain was new, and that steadiness changes how work lands and how favors arrive. The relief you register is not a sudden overturning, it is the slow arrival of fitting pieces. You find that obligations once draining now return something that resembles vocation rather than mere duty. Tasks complete themselves with less attrition because you have learned to place effort where it will hold. Patience is no longer an idle posture but a muscle you exercise day by day. Gratitude retrains where your attention rests, and gratitude is not flashy, it is the small habit of naming what came without your hands forcing it. At irregular intervals, someone who watched from the edges will reach out with a plain, surprise thanks. These moments do not inflate you but redirect your stewardship. An old partner clarifies terms without games, a delayed invoice finds resolution, a neighbor returns a key with an apology that needs no song. You receive these as tokens of a larger shift. Systems align when people keep their parts honestly. Your care for craft becomes a form of quiet witness, and the work itself begins to speak on your behalf. Where you once felt obliged to argue, you now let the work be the argument. This does not make you passive. It makes you deliberate. You keep a ledger of small victories, a steady reply, a meal made without performance, a promise kept though no one watched. These are the bricks with which a meaningful life is built, and you notice their weight when wind and rumor press at the windows. At times old fatigue surfaces and asks for a quick fix, but you have learned to refuse the theatrical rescue. Instead you close the door to noise and let slow repair continue. When someone asks what changed, you answer with a short phrase, more rhythm, less rush. That answer is not a platitude, it is a practice. You schedule rest as if it were a ration of bread so the body does not spend the day bargaining for energy. Work gains focus, and your days acquire chapters that begin and end with care. Where haste used to make a bed of mistakes, measured steps sow soil for things that last. There is a new economy to your life. Instead of trading every minute for output, you invest time into people and tasks whose returns sustain you and others. This economy requires discernment. Not every request deserves a yes, and not every silence needs a breaking. You keep a boundary that is neither hard nor distant. It is porous in ways that protect the fragile while allowing help to pass. Mercy becomes a strategy rather than a sentiment. You give it where it heals and withhold it where it would enable harm. Such decisions are not dramatic. They are often undone by conversation and reconsidered in private. Your moral attention becomes precise, and that precision steadies those around you. Friends notice the change in how you listen. You give space for speech without leaping to solve, and people reply by trusting more. Trust grows in small increments, a return call, a late-night text answered once, an absence honored without explanation. Influence arrives in increments too, often wrapped in mundane requests that reveal larger capacities. You learn to carry this influence without grand gestures, letting it be an instrument for service. As your reach widens, you guard against vanity by naming the source of what carries you forward. This naming keeps the heart open and avoids the trap of seeing success as self-made. You practice saying thank you in ways that do not objectify the giver, and you accept help as a shared good rather than a debt. Parenting, mentoring, and ordinary friendship all receive this new steadiness and repay it in small, cumulative ways. Sometimes you will need to place fences, not out of anger but to preserve the integrity of the work and the people it serves. A fence is not a wall, it is a measure that lets safe exchange happen without damage. You draw them with care and explain where necessary, and people understand more often than you expected. Still, not every heart changes at your pace. Some remain guarded, and some resent the loss of old comforts. You do not waste energy converting them. You tend the field in front of you. In the quiet of evening you map the next day with a pencil and a cup of cooling tea. You set 3 essential tasks and leave room for what cannot be scheduled, a conversation, a pause, an errand that connects you to life beyond the desk. By doing so you refuse the tyranny of endless lists and cultivate a day that can be completed with dignity. This practice yields a strange gift. Time begins to feel less like a string of demands and more like a landscape where you can walk with attention. At moments you will be tempted to shout your side to those who still doubt. You refuse because speaking loudly would unsettle the order you built. Instead you keep a small card with a phrase that steadies you when impatience rises. You read it and breathe. The card works because it reorients you to purpose rather than grievance. Faithfulness continues in acts that look ordinary from the outside, a clear invoice, an honest label, a repair that does not need applause. These acts keep rooms safe and minds uncluttered. You recognize that progress is not always visible, but it is real. It accumulates like sediment in a riverbed, and one day the water runs clearer. When recognition comes, you accept it as a tool to widen the table and not as a seat to occupy alone. That is the mature way forward. Use influence to create space for other voices and to steady those who cannot steady themselves. Generosity becomes targeted and reliable rather than performative. You keep your hands clean by naming sources of help and by refusing to turn giving into a spectacle. At night, in the company of few, you say one quiet prayer not to claim credit but to ask for enduring clarity and humble endurance. You know the work will continue and that each faithful day is a stitch in a fabric that will dress many more days. Stand where you are with a soft confidence that does not demand applause but is prepared for trial. Rest in the knowledge that ordinary fidelity shapes destinies beyond what you can see. Hold close ordinary work, it will outlast spectacle and become the quiet scaffolding for others' lives. You stand at the threshold where influence begins to hum like a gathering storm that will not break the land but will change the weather for those who walk in your shadow. People who once watched you from the margins now notice the pace you kept and bring their own days to a different measure. Recognition will ask for answers you have not yet practiced offering. Fame, where it appears, offers two roads, one lined with mirrors and applause, another that opens toward a common table. The growth of your steward casts longer shadows than you expected. Brightness demands attention and exposes edges that were invisible when everything was dim. Where light increases, so do shapes that need tending. Learn the economy of attention, invest it where it repairs, not where it fuels spectacle. A true leader keeps a ledger of care that is recorded not in headlines but in the steady returns of trust. Teach by presence rather than speech. When invitations ask you to perform, ask whether the invitation enlarges the table or merely raises a platform for show. Say yes to the former and decline the latter without drama. Your refusals are not rejections of people but guardianship of what you are learning to build. Hold a small set of routines sacred. A morning practice of quiet work, a shared meal where phones stay in pockets, and a brief hour of study keep you rooted. Boundaries will be required and some will resent them. Boundaries are not walls built from fear. They are measured lines that protect the fragile and keep a sender strong. Explain them simply. Those who cannot accept offense may speak from scripts that equate presence with power rather than service. You do not need to argue with every voice that misunderstands. Stay steady and let your work speak. When responsibility grows, choose companions who share the same measure of care. Invite collaborators who understand patience as action and mercy as discipline. Build teams that prefer getting work done to getting credit. Train people to notice what breaks and to fix it without waiting for applause. Such allies stand through storms. Practice ordinary generosity. Return a borrowed tool, bring a neighbor soup, answer a late text without performance. Influence is judged by how ordinary life shifts and not by one sermon or speech. Let your acts be steady rhythms and not sudden crescendos. In this way you reduce room for cynicism and enlarge opportunity for others. Remain teachable. No matter the heights that unfold, seek counsel from those who will speak truth kindly. Keep a few books and friends who ground you. Read slowly and return to the practices that formed you. Pride will arrive dressed as helpfulness. Test every impulse to act by whether it serves the work and sustains those you love. Hold public power with private humility. When recognition comes, use it to highlight others. When criticism comes, let it temper you rather than fracture you. Repair relationships with clear apology when needed and offer mercy where it heals. The work of influence is less about control and more about stewardship. Protect joy. Seriousness does not require somberness. Keep small celebrations that mark progress and not perfection. Laugh with friends, walk a quiet street, notice jasmine at a fence. Such acts remind those with you that life is to be enjoyed as it is tended. Prepare for storms without becoming weather. When rumor circles, answer with truth and calm, not counter spectacle. Practice saying less while truth accrues. Over time, constancy will be your defense. The authority you are called to hold arranges light so others can see and do their work well. Consider small measures of that compound. Keep 3 clear priorities each morning and close the day by noting what moved. Write a short paragraph about the day and tuck it into a notebook. Visit someone who is overlooked and ask a single open question about their life. These modest disciplines train attention and protect against shortcuts that make noise feel productive. When offered glitter with promise, test them by whether they ask you to widen the table or to climb a platform for show. In quiet hours, name your sources. Gratitude is a mirror that deters self-adoration. Thank those who carried you and write notes that record support. Teach so others can lead where you cannot. In multiplication, your work becomes a field rather than a stage. Stand with gentle resolve. Let your life argue for patience, steady labor, and ordinary mercy. The seasons will test you again. When they do, return to these small measures and let them steady your feet. Tend what you have begun is both a gift and duty. You stand at the edge of a season that feels less like arrival and more like an invitation to continue careful work. Movements that once felt tentative now carry steadiness that others notice with a small intake of breath. Where noise used to push, rooms now settle when you enter. People who once measured you by hurried metrics find themselves pausing to learn the cadence you keep. Influence has not crowned you, it asks you to hold what is entrusted. Daily life becomes your ministry. You answer letters plainly, repair what frays without announcement, and sit with those whose days have frayed until their edges soften. Kindness is practiced as a craft that makes communities habitable. The circle of care you draw widens because it holds. In private rooms, you teach others how to live with integrity by showing what steady attention looks like. Old scripts will call you back. Gossip can curl around truth like smoke, and some will try to make your name a weather vane for their comfort. When pressure arrives, you return to the work and the faces beside you. Do not waste energy convincing every observer. Conservation of force is itself a moral choice. Let time and consistency do the convincing rhetoric cannot. Use recognition as a table rather than a ladder. When platforms open, ask whether the opportunity enlarges the circle or simply adds another mirror. Favor places that allow practical help to move and decline those that only summon applause. This is how influence becomes service. As influence grows, so will requests that test your motives. Money, titles, and praise will arrive with easy solutions that require you to exchange integrity for convenience. Test offers against the needs of those you serve. Make small rituals that remind you of origins, a morning reading that centers decisions, a note to an early mentor, a simple meal with someone who remembers the work before the praise. These anchors keep pride from rising. Teach by example more than proclamation. Shape policies gently. Build teams where diligence is valued more than image. Choose collaborators who prefer mending to preening. Give the people you lead permission to fail and instruction about how to return with honesty. Your authority will be judged by how many hands are steadied by your steadiness, not by how many heads bow. Guard your heart against 2 idols, the need to be seen and the desire to be immune. The first will demand acting beyond what is necessary, the second will keep you from asking for help. Both erode the humility that made your work trustworthy. When anxiety presses, name it plainly to a confidant and then return to the next faithful thing. Provision will come in unexpected forms. A postponed account clears, a neighbor returns an old kindness with renewed warmth, a blocked door opens because someone honored a commitment you never noticed. Receive these with modest gratitude and without assuming you have earned them in fullness. The source of such seasons is communal and often feels like a small miracle. Let gratitude be the ledger you keep. When wrongs are repaired, do not stage a triumph. Rebuild quietly and invite those who were hurt to take a place at the table. Forgiveness that needs a scene is suspect. Forgiveness that rebuilds trust with conditions and clarity is courageous and endures. Hold both mercy and boundary in hand. They are not opposites but companions. Now imagine a small rectangle at the center of your view. It will open with a soft call. Inside, a short film will carry the rhythm you have practiced: close attention, modest acts, and scenes of ordinary courage. The images show rooms where kindness was given without fanfare and where truth was preferred to rumor. Press play and remain with it. Watch how quiet sequences set a mood words alone sometimes cannot. If the film moves you, consider joining the gatherings that follow. Register so you are informed when the next chapter appears and enable prompts so the times do not slip past you. This request is not commerce but an invitation to be present when new lessons arrive. Subscribe if doing so helps you show up more faithfully. Walk forward with hands ready to serve and a heart that knows how to rest. The tasks ahead demand endurance but not desperation. Keep small practices that honor the source of what has held you and keep asking for chances to learn. The road will widen and the work will multiply. Carry influence lightly and shelter those who need a seat at the table. When you tire, return to ordinary duties and let them recompose courage. The life you keep will be a map for others who have yet to learn their way. Keep a small journal of days when patience won, a list of 3 people you served this week, and a single question to ask at the close of each evening. These tiny records turn memory into curriculum and help you notice how quiet fidelity accumulates into public good and shared practice. Keep close those who speak truth into your day's end. Amen.